Message from Human Resources: your employment at MetroTech Solutions has been terminated, effective immediately. Please refrain from accessing company systems or premises. Severance details to follow. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Slack notification lit up my phone screen at 10:32 a.m. on a Tuesday. I stared at it, my coffee mug suspended halfway to my mouth, as 38 coworkers continued their virtual morning meeting, unaware that I had just been fired via a chat message. No warning, no explanation, no chance to respond. Just a digital pink slip while my teammates discussed quarterly goals as if nothing had happened. My name is Maya Chen, and I need you to understand that this wasn't just a shocking way to lose a job. This was the calculated dismantling of 3 years of my career by people I had trusted and respected. People who had no idea what I really knew about their company. I unmuted myself on the Zoom call, my voice steadier than I expected. I think I need to step away from this meeting. It seems HR has something they'd like to discuss with me. Darren Wright, my direct supervisor, froze momentarily before his corporate mask slipped back into place. Maya, we can talk after the meeting. Let's not disrupt the team's momentum. I think being fired via Slack during a team meeting has already disrupted my momentum, Darren, I replied, watching as confused messages flooded the chat. Maybe you can explain to everyone why your senior data analyst was just terminated without warning in the middle of project planning? The call erupted into confused chatter. Some people looked shocked, others uncomfortable, a few seemed to be frantically messaging each other privately. Samira from marketing had her hand over her mouth. Josh from engineering looked like he was about to be sick. This meeting is adjourned, Darren announced sharply. We'll reconvene this afternoon. Maya, check your personal email for further instructions. Before anyone could object, Darren ended the call for all participants. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of my dedication to MetroTech Solutions, the whiteboard covered in project timelines, the stack of industry reports I'd stayed up analyzing all weekend, the custom dashboard I'd built to track our key performance metrics. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, solving problems the executive team couldn't even understand, implementing systems that had saved the company millions. All ended with a Slack message. My phone immediately lit up with texts from colleagues. What happened? From Eliza in customer success. Are you okay? This is insane. From Trevor in product development. Did you know this was coming? From Jordan in sales. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I checked my personal email where I found a message from Darren with the subject line, termination details. Maya, as per company policy, your access to all MetroTech systems has been revoked. Your personal items will be packed and shipped to your address on file. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks of severance, minus applicable taxes. Please sign and return the attached confidentiality reminder and non-disparagement agreement to receive your severance payment. No explanation. No real reason. Just corporate procedure executed with cold efficiency. I stared at my computer screen, trying to process what had happened. The timing wasn't coincidental, that much I knew immediately. Just yesterday, I'd requested access to the company's salary database for a compensation analysis project. The official reason was to identify pay disparities that could affect retention. The unofficial reason was something Darren and the executive team would be desperate to prevent. My hands were trembling slightly, but my mind was racing with perfect clarity. I picked up my personal laptop and opened the secure folder I'd created 3 months ago, the folder containing evidence that MetroTech's leadership was systematically suppressing employee organization efforts while violating multiple labor laws in the process. It had started innocently enough last December. A casual conversation in the break room about healthcare benefits had evolved into regular lunch discussions about workplace conditions. By January, a core group of us were meeting after hours, researching our rights, discussing the benefits of collective bargaining. Nothing radical, just employees educating themselves about workplace protections. In February, Chelsea from accounting mentioned that she'd overheard Darren and Victoria Blackwell, our CEO, discussing problem employees who were stirring up trouble. A week later, Tyler from customer service, one of our most vocal advocates for better working conditions, was let go for performance issues, despite having received an outstanding review just a month earlier. That's when I started paying closer attention, documenting patterns, saving screenshots of suspicious communications. As a senior data analyst with access to multiple company systems, I was in a unique position to notice things others might miss. Like the fact that every employee who had signed a pro-union petition in March had received a negative performance review in April, regardless of their actual contributions. Or that the company had hired a consulting firm specializing in employee relations management, a euphemism for union busting, just days after that first petition circulated. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Or that Victoria Blackwell had personally authorized a secret employee risk assessment that flagged workers based on factors like collectivist tendencies and excessive interest in company policies. I'd been careful, covering my tracks, only accessing information I had legitimate reasons to view. But yesterday's request for salary data must have triggered alarms. They must have realized I was seeing too much, connecting too many dots. I checked my phone again, 17 text messages from concerned colleagues, 3 missed calls from Darren. I ignored them all and instead opened my email to compose a new message to the National Labor Relations Board. Before I could start typing, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found Samira standing there, still wearing her work blazer, looking nervous. Maya, what the hell happened? Everyone's freaking out. Darren called an emergency leadership meeting, IT is doing some kind of system audit, and HR won't tell us anything. I hesitated, not sure how much to share. Samira and I had always been friendly, but she reported directly to Victoria. Her loyalties were unclear. I think we both know what happened, I said carefully. The question is how much you already know about it. Samira glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. Can I come in? I don't think we should talk about this in the hallway. I stepped aside to let her enter, my guard still up. My apartment was modest but comfortable, a one-bedroom place about 15 minutes from the office. I'd chosen it specifically for the short commute back when I believed that dedication and hard work would be recognized and rewarded at MetroTech. They're saying you accessed confidential information, Samira said once we were inside. That you violated data security protocols. Is that what Darren told everyone after I was removed from the call? She nodded. He said there had been a security incident and that legal had advised immediate termination. Victoria backed him up. Of course they had. I gestured for Samira to sit down while I made us both coffee. The familiar routine helped settle my nerves. As I considered how much to reveal. Samira, what do you know about the consultants from Precision Workforce Solutions? Her expression shifted subtly, a mixture of recognition and discomfort. The employee engagement specialists? They've been running those professional development workshops for the last few months. And what about the employees who've been let go since they arrived? Tyler, Javier, Madison, all high performers, all suddenly underperforming according to management. Samira looked down at her hands. I've had concerns about that, to be honest. It seemed targeted. It was targeted, I confirmed, setting her coffee down in front of her. And it wasn't about performance. It was about silencing people who were talking about workplace rights. For the next 20 minutes, I carefully explained what I'd discovered, the patterns of retaliation, the secret employee monitoring, the coordinated efforts to identify and remove anyone who expressed interest in collective action. I didn't reveal how I'd obtained the information, just that I had documentation. Samira looked increasingly troubled. I knew something felt off about those terminations, but I had no idea it was this organized. How long have you been tracking this? Long enough to know my firing wasn't about data security. It was about preventing me from finding more evidence. Samira took a slow sip of her coffee. So what are you going to do now? I'm going to file a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board. What they're doing isn't just unethical, it's illegal. She set down her mug carefully. Maya, you need to be careful. Victoria has connections everywhere. She sits on boards with judges, plays golf with politicians. The company has resources you don't. I'm not afraid of Victoria Blackwell, I replied, though that wasn't entirely true. I was afraid, just not enough to stay silent. After Samira left, promising to keep our conversation confidential, I returned to my computer and spent the next several hours organizing my evidence and preparing my complaint to the NLRB. The documentation was extensive: screenshots, meeting notes, emails I'd been copied on, the mysterious consultant invoices coded as employee development initiatives. My phone continued to buzz with messages from colleagues, but I focused on my task. This wasn't just about my termination anymore. This was about protecting people who were being systematically targeted for exercising their legal rights. At 6:37 p.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Maya Chen, a smooth, controlled voice asked. Yes, who's calling? This is Victoria Blackwell. I think we should talk. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not sure we have anything to discuss, Victoria. I believe we do. There seems to have been a misunderstanding regarding your termination. Darren may have acted hastily. If you're amenable, I'd like to discuss the possibility of reinstatement. The sudden reversal was suspicious. Victoria Blackwell didn't make personal calls to fired employees to offer their jobs back, especially not after they'd been labeled security risks. What prompted this change of heart? I asked. Let's just say certain information has come to light that suggests a reevaluation is warranted. I value your contributions to MetroTech, Maya. Always have. What Victoria didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd already submitted my complaint to the NLRB, complete with evidence of MetroTech's systematic anti-union activities. I'd also reached out to a labor rights attorney who had expressed immediate interest in my case. I appreciate the offer, Victoria, but I'll need time to consider it. Today has been disorienting. Of course, she said, her voice still carefully modulated. Take the evening to think it over. But I should mention that this offer includes a significant compensation adjustment and a move to the executive track. Your talents are clearly being underutilized in your former position. A bribe, thinly disguised as a promotion. They must have found something in their system audit, perhaps traces of my research, or maybe Samira had said something despite her promise. Either way, they were scared. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision, I said, knowing I had no intention of accepting. Excellent. And Maya? This conversation is just between us for now. HR processes can be so tedious when reversing decisions. Best to have everything arranged before making any announcements. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my apartment, thinking about Victoria's offer. The promotion would mean at least a 50% salary increase, probably an equity package too. Financial security, career advancement, everything I'd been working toward for 3 years. All I had to do was look the other way while my colleagues were systematically silenced and pushed out for trying to secure better working conditions. Before diving deeper, could you please take a moment to tell me in the comments where you're watching from? I want to know where my story is reaching. And if you find this valuable, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification, because this story is going places none of us expected. My name is Maya Chen, and I want you to understand something about the moment I'm describing. This wasn't just about losing a job. This was about discovering that the company I had dedicated 3 years of my life to was willing to break the law to prevent its employees from exercising their basic rights. Victoria's call had confirmed everything I suspected. They were scared of what I knew, and they were willing to pay to keep me quiet. The most devastating part? I had genuinely believed in MetroTech's mission. I'd bought into Victoria's speeches about creating technology that served humanity. I'd worked weekends and holidays because I thought we were building something worthwhile. I'd defended the company to friends who questioned their labor practices, insisting that my experience had been positive. There's no need for lawyers, I thought to myself as I drafted an email response to Victoria. I'll consider your offer and call you tomorrow to discuss details. But I had no intention of calling. Instead, I spent that evening reaching out to every colleague who had been terminated under suspicious circumstances over the past 6 months. Most were hesitant to talk at first, fearful of violating the non-disparagement agreements they'd signed to receive their severance. But when I explained what I'd discovered and that I'd already filed a complaint with the NLRB, several agreed to share their experiences. Tyler had been fired the day after he'd asked about organizing a staff meeting to discuss healthcare benefits. Javier was terminated after sharing an article about successful tech industry unions in the company chat. Madison lost her job after she was seen talking to known labor organizers during a conference. Pattern after pattern, all pointing to the same conclusion: MetroTech was engaged in systematic, illegal union busting. By midnight, I had statements from 7 former employees documenting retaliation for protected activities. I forwarded everything to my attorney, then finally allowed myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Victoria and a text message that simply read, "Please call me ASAP. Offer significantly improved." Instead of calling Victoria, I checked my email and found a message from my attorney confirming that the NLRB had received my complaint and was assigning an investigator. Things were moving quickly, more quickly than I had anticipated. I was making a late breakfast when my doorbell rang again. This time it was Elena from HR, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes instead of her usual corporate attire. "Maya, I'm so sorry to show up unannounced," she said, shifting nervously. "But Victoria asked me to deliver this personally." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a formal letter offering reinstatement with a 75% salary increase, an immediate signing bonus of $50,000, and a director-level position reporting directly to Victoria. The only condition was that I sign an enhanced confidentiality agreement that specifically prohibited discussing any internal company matters with regulatory agencies without prior approval from legal. In other words, I'd get wealth and status. If I agreed never to mention what I knew about their union-busting activities to the authorities I'd already contacted. Victoria would like your answer by the end of day, Elena added, not quite meeting my eyes. She's prepared to go even higher if necessary. Elena, I said carefully, how many of these special agreements have you delivered in the past year? She looked startled. What do you mean? I mean, how many employees has MetroTech paid to keep quiet about potentially illegal activities? Elena's professional composure cracked slightly. Maya, I'm just doing my job. I don't set company policy. No, but you enforce it. You process the terminations. You prepare the separation agreements. You know exactly what's happening. She glanced around nervously, as if afraid someone might overhear us. I have a mortgage, Maya. I have kids in college. And the people being fired for talking about their workplace rights? Many of them have families too. Responsibilities. Dreams. Elena looked genuinely distressed now. What exactly do you want from me? The truth. When did MetroTech start specifically targeting employees who showed interest in organizing? She hesitated, then sighed deeply. The board meeting last November. Victoria presented a risk assessment identifying workforce organization as a potential threat to the upcoming Series D funding round. They brought in Precision Workforce Solutions the following week. And you facilitated all of it. I did my job, she said defensively, but I could see the guilt in her expression. Would you be willing to say that to an NLRB investigator? Elena's eyes widened. You've contacted the labor board? Yesterday afternoon. They're opening an investigation. She took a step back, visibly processing this information. I need to go. Elena, wait, I called as she turned to leave. You have a choice here. You can continue being part of the problem, or you can help fix it. She paused at the door. I'll think about it. After Elena left, I examined Victoria's offer more carefully. The money was substantial, life-changing, even. With that kind of financial cushion, I could take time off, travel, maybe even start my own business. All I had to do was sacrifice my integrity and abandon my colleagues. The choice seemed obvious when framed that way, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted. I'd worked hard for 3 years, often at the expense of my personal life. A part of me felt I deserved that money, that recognition. I was still contemplating the offer when my phone rang, another unfamiliar number. Ms. Chen? This is Ramon Gutierrez from the National Labor Relations Board. We've reviewed your complaint and supporting documentation, and I'd like to schedule an initial interview regarding your allegations against MetroTech Solutions. The official response was happening faster than I'd expected. Of course. When would you like to meet? We have an opening tomorrow morning if that works for you. Given the nature of your evidence and the potential ongoing violations, we're prioritizing this case. We arranged to meet at the NLRB regional office at 9 a.m. the following day. As soon as I hung up, my phone immediately lit up with a call from Victoria. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again. And again. On the 4th attempt, I answered. Maya, I'm concerned that we're having trouble connecting today, Victoria said, her voice pleasant but with an unmistakable edge. Elena mentioned she delivered our offer this morning. She did. It's very generous. But not generous enough. It seems. What would make it more appealing to you? Executive title? Equity? More flexible working arrangements? Victoria, why are you so determined to bring me back? Yesterday I was a security risk who needed to be immediately terminated. Today I'm being offered an executive position. What changed? There was a brief pause before she answered. Let's be candid with each other, Maya. You're an exceptional analyst with valuable institutional knowledge. Your termination was an overreaction to a misunderstanding. I'm simply trying to correct that mistake. And it has nothing to do with what I might know about Precision Workforce Solutions and their work with MetroTech. Another pause, longer this time. I'm not sure what you're implying. I think you know exactly what I'm implying. The targeted terminations. The secret monitoring of employees who expressed interest in organizing. The coordinated efforts to identify and remove anyone who might support unionization. Those are serious allegations, Maya. Without evidence, they could be considered defamatory. I have evidence, Victoria. Quite a lot of it, actually. And so does the National Labor Relations Board. The silence that followed was deafening. When Victoria finally spoke again, her voice had lost its friendly veneer. You've made a serious mistake. Whatever you think you know, whatever evidence you think you have, it won't be enough. MetroTech has resources you can't imagine. Legal teams that specialize in discrediting whistleblowers. PR firms that can reshape narratives. You're one person against an institution. Maybe so, I replied, surprised by my own calmness. But I'm one person with documented evidence of labor law violations. And I'm not alone anymore. What does that mean? It means I've been in contact with every employee MetroTech has unfairly terminated in the past 6 months. It means 7 people have already provided statements to the NLRB corroborating my complaint. It means Elena is questioning her role in facilitating these violations. Elena works for MetroTech. Her loyalty is to this company. Her legal obligation is to follow the law, Victoria. Just like yours. I could almost hear her calculating, reassessing the situation. The offer is rescinded, she finally said. Expect to hear from our legal department regarding your breach of confidentiality agreements. I look forward to discussing those agreements with the NLRB investigators tomorrow morning. After she hung up, I sat in the sudden silence of my apartment, my heart racing despite my outwardly calm demeanor during the call. I had just directly challenged one of the most powerful executives in the tech industry, a woman known for destroying careers of people who crossed her. But strangely, instead of fear, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't experienced in years. The path forward was difficult but clear. I spent the rest of the day preparing for my meeting with the NLRB, organizing my evidence, and reaching out to more former colleagues. By evening, 3 more had agreed to provide statements about retaliatory termination. At 8:42 p.m., I received a text message from Elena. I've been thinking about what you said. I can't sleep knowing what I've been part of. What do I need to do? I replied with my attorney's contact information and a simple message: tell the truth. The next morning, I arrived at the NLRB regional office 30 minutes early, dressed in the same professional attire I would have worn to an important client meeting at MetroTech. The building was unremarkable, a standard government office with fluorescent lighting and dated furniture, but to me, it represented something profound: accountability. Ramon Gutierrez, the NLRB investigator, was a serious man in his 50s. With reading glasses perched on the end of his nose and case files stacked neatly on his desk. He greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a small conference room where my attorney, Layla Washington, was already waiting. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming in, Ramon said as we settled into our seats. Based on the preliminary evidence you've submitted, we believe there's sufficient cause to open a formal investigation into MetroTech Solutions for potential violations of the National Labor Relations Act. For the next 3 hours, I walked Ramon through everything I had discovered: the targeted terminations, the secret employee monitoring, the consultant firm specializing in union prevention, the coded communications between executives. I provided screenshots, email chains, meeting notes, and the statements from former employees I'd gathered. This is unusually comprehensive documentation, Ramon noted, examining a spreadsheet that tracked employee terminations alongside their known pro-union activities. How were you able to access all of this information? I explained my role as senior data analyst, how my position had given me legitimate access to various company systems, and how I'd noticed concerning patterns emerging after colleagues began discussing workplace conditions. I never accessed anything I wasn't authorized to view, I clarified. Everything in my documentation came from systems I used regularly for my job. Ramon nodded, making notes. And you believe your termination was directly related to your request to access salary data for a compensation analysis project? Yes. I believe they realized I was connecting too many dots and could potentially discover evidence of pay discrimination that would strengthen any organizing efforts. As the meeting continued, Ramon's expression grew increasingly grave. By the time we concluded, he was shaking his head in disbelief. Ms. Chen, in my 15 years with the NLRB, I've seen many cases of anti-union activity, but few with this level of coordination and deliberate intent. We'll be moving forward with our investigation immediately and may seek an injunctive order to prevent further retaliatory actions while we proceed. As Layla and I left the building, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since seeing that Slack message, I felt like I had done the right thing, not just for myself, but for everyone at MetroTech who deserved better. You did well in there, Layla said as we walked to the parking lot. Very clear, very factual. But you should prepare yourself, this is just the beginning. MetroTech will fight back hard. She wasn't wrong. By the time I arrived home, I had an email from MetroTech's legal department alleging multiple confidentiality violations and threatening immediate legal action if I didn't cease all communication with current and former employees. The language was deliberately intimidating, filled with legal jargon and veiled threats. I forwarded the email to Layla, who responded within minutes. Classic intimidation tactic. They're hoping you'll back down. Don't engage directly. Let me handle all communications with their legal team. That evening, I received a surprising call from Josh in engineering, one of the colleagues I'd worked closely with for the past 2 years. Maya, I don't even know how to process what's happening, he said, his voice hushed as if he was afraid of being overheard. The office is chaos. Victoria's had emergency meetings with department heads all day. IT is doing system-wide security audits. People are whispering about labor board investigators. What are they telling employees about my termination? I asked. The official line is still that you violated data security protocols, but nobody's buying it. Especially after Elena didn't show up for work today. That was news to me. Elena didn't come in? No, and HR is being weird about it. Just said she's taking personal time. But then Samira overheard Victoria telling someone to contain the Elena situation, whatever that means. After we hung up, I immediately texted Elena, "Are you okay? Heard you didn't come to work today." Her response came nearly an hour later, "I'm fine. Made my statement to the NLRB this morning. Victoria knows. Can't go back now." I felt a surge of respect for Elena. Despite her initial reluctance, she had chosen to do the right thing, even knowing it would likely cost her job. Her testimony as an HR director would be damning. She had first-hand knowledge of every termination, every policy change, every consultant meeting. The next 2 days passed in a blur of legal consultations, media inquiries, which Layla advised me not to respond to yet, and messages from current and former MetroTech employees. Word was spreading about the NLRB investigation, and more people were coming forward with their experiences. Then, on Friday morning, everything escalated dramatically. I woke up to breaking news that MetroTech stock had dropped 8% in pre-market trading after Bloomberg reported on the NLRB investigation. The article mentioned serious allegations of systematic labor law violations and potential class action by former employees. By noon, 3 major clients had publicly announced they were reassessing their relationship with MetroTech in light of the allegations. By evening, the stock was down 17%, and the company had issued a terse statement denying any wrongdoing and characterizing the investigation as based on false claims from a disgruntled former employee. That night, I received another unexpected call, this time from Victoria Blackwell herself. "This has gone far enough," she said without preamble. "You've made your point. Now let's discuss how we can resolve this situation like reasonable people." "I'm not sure what you're proposing, Victoria. A settlement. Generous compensation for you, reinstatement for any employees who wish to return, and a commitment to review our workplace policies with employee input." The offer was substantial. Much more than I had expected this early in the process. But something felt off about Victoria's sudden willingness to compromise. Why the change of heart? 2 days ago your legal team was threatening me with lawsuits. Business realities, Maya. This public relations situation is affecting our stock price, our client relationships, our upcoming funding round. The board feels it's prudent to resolve the matter quickly. And what about the NLRB investigation? Part of any settlement would naturally include withdrawing your complaint. I thought about her offer carefully. The money would be significant. The affected employees would get their jobs back. MetroTech would allegedly improve its policies. On the surface, it seemed like a win. But then I thought about what would happen after the media attention died down. Would the reinstated employees be subtly pushed out again once the spotlight moved elsewhere? Would the policy reviews be superficial gestures without real change? Would the next group of employees who tried to organize face the same retaliation, just executed more carefully? I appreciate the offer, Victoria, but I can't accept it. The NLRB investigation needs to run its course. Her tone chilled immediately. "You're making a serious mistake. This won't end well for you." "Maybe not," I acknowledged. "But it might end better for everyone who works at MetroTech in the future." After that conversation, things moved quickly. The NLRB accelerated their investigation based on the evidence I'd provided and Elena's corroborating testimony. More former employees came forward. Current employees began organizing openly, creating a formal committee to discuss unionization. 2 weeks after my termination, Ramon called with unexpected news. "Ms. Chen, we've uncovered something I think you should know about," he said, his voice unusually serious. "During our review of MetroTech's financial records, we discovered a pattern of payments that appears concerning." "What kind of payments?" I asked. "Regular transfers to a consulting firm called Global Workforce Advisors, starting approximately 3 years ago." The name wasn't familiar to me. I don't think I came across that company in any of my research. That's because it's a shell corporation, Ramon explained. It exists only on paper. The payments, however, are quite real. $10,000 per month for the past 3 years. Where was the money actually going? That's what's interesting. The funds were ultimately routed to a private account belonging to one Lawrence Chen. I felt a chill run through me. Lawrence Chen is my father. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My father had been receiving $10,000 monthly payments from MetroTech for 3 years, payments disguised as consulting fees to a fake company. Payments that had started right around the time I was hired. My father, Lawrence Chen, was a renowned labor economist who had spent decades advocating for workers' rights. His research on the economic benefits of unionized workforces was cited in policy discussions around the world. He had raised me with strong values about workplace dignity and collective power. He was also suffering from early-onset Alzheimer's, diagnosed 4 years ago. The progression had been devastating, a brilliant mind slowly losing its moorings. The specialized care facility where he lived cost nearly $12,000 per month, far more than his university pension and savings could cover. I had been contributing what I could from my salary, but it was never enough. The financial strain had been constant, crushing. Then, mysteriously, 3 years ago, the care facility had informed me that an anonymous foundation had offered to subsidize my father's care. The monthly contribution from the Sanderson Healthcare Initiative reduced my financial responsibility to a manageable $2,000 per month. I had been grateful, relieved, never questioning the sudden intervention. Now I understood what had really happened. Victoria Blackwell had bought my father's care, and by extension, my silence, without my knowledge. The realization made me physically ill. I excused myself from the call with Ramon and barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. When I returned to the phone, my hands were shaking. How did you discover this connection? I asked. Once we identified the unusual payment pattern, we followed standard investigative procedures, Ramon explained. The connection to your father wasn't immediately apparent, but when we cross-referenced with your employment records, the timing raised red flags. I had no idea, I said, my voice hollow. They never told me. We believe you, Ms. Chen. In fact, this strengthens the case against MetroTech. This appears to be a sophisticated form of financial control, creating leverage over an employee without their knowledge. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd learned. For 3 years, Victoria Blackwell had been secretly paying for my father's care through a shell company. She had created a hidden obligation that I didn't even know existed. But why? Why go to such elaborate lengths? Then I remembered something from my first interview with MetroTech. Victoria had asked about my background, and I'd mentioned my father's work in labor economics. I'd spoken proudly of his advocacy for workers' rights, his research on the economic benefits of unionization. I'd even joked that fighting for fair workplace practices was in my DNA. Victoria must have seen me as a potential threat from the beginning, someone who might eventually advocate for organization within her company. Rather than simply not hiring me, she'd created a more insidious solution: financial dependency, disguised as anonymous charity. And it had worked perfectly. For 3 years, I'd been focused on my work, grateful that my father's care was secure, never suspecting that my employer had manufactured that security as a form of control. My phone rang again. It was Layla, my attorney. Maya, the NLRB investigator, just called me about these payments to your father. This is a significant development. It suggests MetroTech was engaged in manipulative labor practices from the moment they hired you. But I never knew about the payments, I said. How could they control me with something I wasn't aware of? That's what makes it so insidious, Layla explained. They weren't controlling you directly, they were creating conditions where they could exert maximum pressure if needed. If you ever started causing problems, they could simply reveal the payments and threaten to stop them. It's a sophisticated form of potential leverage. What does this mean for the case? It strengthens it considerably. This shows a pattern of calculated behavior aimed at preventing labor organization. The NLRB will take this very seriously. After we hung up, I immediately called the care facility where my father lived. I needed to understand exactly what would happen now that the truth about his financial arrangements had been exposed. Sanderson Healthcare Initiative, the billing coordinator repeated when I asked about the foundation. Let me check our records. Yes, they've been covering approximately $10,000 of your father's monthly care costs for the past 3 years. And if those payments were to stop, what would happen? Well, you would become responsible for the full amount, of course. If those charges couldn't be covered, we would unfortunately need to discuss alternative care arrangements within 30 days. Alternative care arrangements. A polite way of saying my father would need to leave the facility that had been his home for 4 years, where the staff knew how to manage his increasingly difficult symptoms, where he still occasionally had moments of clarity and comfort. The thought was unbearable. But so was the knowledge that Victoria Blackwell had been secretly financing his care, creating a hidden dependency I never consented to. I spent that evening researching alternative care options, applying for emergency assistance programs, calculating how long my savings would last if I covered the full cost myself. The numbers were grim. Without the mysterious foundation support, I couldn't afford to keep my father at Willowbrook for more than 2 months. Just before midnight, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Maya Chen, a familiar voice, asked. Yes, who's calling? This is Dr. Patricia Vance from Willowbrook Care Center. I'm calling about Lawrence Chen's account. My heart sank. Yes, what about it? We received notification today that the Sanderson Healthcare Initiative will be discontinuing their financial support, effective immediately. I wanted to reach out personally because this is quite unusual. The foundation has been extremely consistent for 3 years. I understand, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm aware of the situation. Maya, I don't mean to pry, but this creates a significant financial gap. Lawrence's condition requires specialized care that few facilities can provide. Without the foundation's support, the monthly cost will increase to $12,000 immediately. I closed my eyes, trying to think. What options do we have? There are some state assistance programs, but they typically have long waiting lists. We can try to find another charitable foundation, but that process usually takes months. In the meantime, we're required to give families 30 days notice before any care changes would take effect. 30 days. 1 month to somehow find $10,000 per month in additional funds, or move my father to a facility that couldn't properly care for his condition. I understand, Dr. Vance. I'll figure something out. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, weighing impossible choices. I could withdraw my NLRB complaint, accept Victoria's settlement offer, and secure my father's continued care. Or I could stand firm, fight for justice for all MetroTech employees, and somehow find a way to manage my father's increasing needs with drastically reduced resources. The next morning, I received another call from Victoria. I understand there's been some confusion about your father's care arrangements, she said, her voice artificially sympathetic. Such an unfortunate coincidence that the foundation support would be discontinued right when you're dealing with your employment transition. So this was her play, revealing the leverage she'd created years ago, making it clear that my father's well-being hung in the balance. It's not a coincidence, is it, Victoria? I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. The Sanderson Healthcare Initiative doesn't exist. It's just a cover for MetroTech's payments. A brief pause. I'm not sure what you're implying, Maya. I'm simply expressing concern about your father's situation. The NLRB has traced the payments, Victoria. They know about global workforce advisors. They know about the monthly transfers to my father's care facility. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her tone had changed, no more pretense of sympathy, just cold calculation. Let me be direct, then. Your father has received nearly $360,000 in care expenses over the past 3 years. Care that you could never have afforded on your own. Care that can continue if you make the right decision now. You mean if I withdraw my complaint and accept your settlement? Precisely. Everyone wins. You get financial security for yourself and continued care for your father. The affected employees get their jobs back. MetroTech implements improved workplace policies. The matter is resolved quickly and quietly. For a long moment, I said nothing, letting Victoria's offer hang in the digital space between us. The choice she was presenting seemed impossible, my father's well-being or justice for dozens of wrongfully terminated employees. My personal security or a chance to stop systematic labor violations that affected hundreds of people. I need time to think, I finally said. You have 24 hours, Victoria replied. After that, we'll need to move forward with alternative arrangements. After she hung up, I sat motionless in my apartment, staring at the wall where I'd taped up photographs of my father, images capturing his journey from the brilliant, passionate man who had raised me to the increasingly confused person now, dependent on specialized care. In one photo from just 2 years ago, he was still lucid enough to attend a small award ceremony where his last published research paper had been honored. I remembered how proud he'd been that day, how he'd squeezed my hand and whispered, "Never compromise your principles, Maya. They're the only thing no one can take from you." The irony was devastating. The man who had taught me to stand firm for workers' rights was now being used as leverage to make me abandon those very principles. I picked up my phone and called Layla. Victoria just made her move, I explained. She's offering to continue my father's care payments if I drop the complaint. That's tantamount to blackmail, Layla said, her voice sharp with indignation. And it further demonstrates MetroTech's pattern of manipulative labor practices. It's also incredibly effective, I admitted. I have 30 days to figure out new care arrangements for my father if I refuse. Maya, I know this puts you in an impossible position. No one would blame you for accepting her offer given these circumstances. But I would blame myself. And somewhere deep inside, the part of my father that still existed, the principled economist who had spent his career fighting for workplace justice, would be disappointed. What if we accelerate the NLRB process? I asked. Is there any way to get temporary relief while the investigation continues? Actually, Layla said thoughtfully, this new development might help us do exactly that. Let me make some calls. 2 hours later, she called back with unexpected news. The NLRB is prepared to seek an emergency injunctive order under Section 10(j) of the National Labor Relations Act, she explained. This would prevent MetroTech from discontinuing your father's care payments while the case proceeds. They can do that? Yes. Given the evidence that these payments were part of a sophisticated scheme to create leverage over an employee, they have grounds to preserve the status quo during the investigation. It's not guaranteed, but we have a strong case for the injunction. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. How quickly could this happen? We have a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. The NLRB's attorneys will argue that allowing MetroTech to suddenly withdraw these payments would essentially permit them to benefit from their own unlawful labor practice. The next morning, I arrived at the federal courthouse 30 minutes early, dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit I'd worn to important client presentations at MetroTech. The irony wasn't lost on me. Today I would sit in a courtroom and watch attorneys argue about whether the company that fired me should be forced to continue paying for my father's care while they investigated the company for labor violations. The legal proceedings were complex and filled with technical arguments. MetroTech's attorneys insisted that the payments were merely charitable contributions with no connection to employment matters. The NLRB's legal team methodically presented evidence of the shell company, the timing that aligned perfectly with my hiring, and the sudden termination of payments immediately following my NLRB complaint. After 3 hours of arguments, the judge granted the temporary injunction. MetroTech would be required to continue the care payments at the previous level until the NLRB investigation was completed and a final determination was made. As we left the courthouse, Ramon pulled me aside. This is just the beginning, Ms. Chen. The full investigation will take time, but based on what we've already uncovered, I believe MetroTech has engaged in serious violations of federal labor law. I nodded, feeling both relieved and overwhelmed. My father's care was secure. For now, but the fight was far from over. When I checked my phone, I had a text message from an unknown number. This changes nothing. You've just made things more complicated and more public. Last chance to resolve this privately. VB, I didn't respond. Victoria's threats had lost their power now that the court had intervened. That evening, as I was making dinner in my apartment, someone knocked on my door. When I checked the peephole, I was surprised to see Darren Wright, my former supervisor, standing in the hallway looking uncomfortable. I opened the door cautiously. Darren? What are you doing here? He glanced around nervously. Can I come in? I don't want to have this conversation in the hallway. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. Darren had always been Victoria's loyal lieutenant, executing her directives without question. His presence in my apartment could only mean trouble. If you're here to deliver another settlement offer from Victoria, you can save your breath, I said as he awkwardly took a seat at my kitchen table. The court has granted an injunction, so she's lost her leverage. I'm not here on Victoria's behalf, he said, not meeting my eyes. She doesn't know I'm here. That surprised me. Then why are you here? Because everything is falling apart at MetroTech, and I can't be part of it anymore. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen many times during difficult projects. The NLRB investigators were at the office today. They've issued document preservation notices for everything: emails, Slack messages, meeting notes, performance reviews. They're interviewing everyone who had any involvement in termination decisions over the past year. That's standard procedure for a labor investigation, Darren. You don't understand. They're going to find things that go beyond what you already know. My interest sharpened. What kind of things? He hesitated, then reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a flash drive. Internal strategy documents. Meeting recordings. Things Victoria never put in writing but said behind closed doors. The real targets weren't just people talking about unions, they were anyone who questioned certain company practices. What practices? Financial reporting inconsistencies. Customer data usage that pushed regulatory boundaries. Victoria's been cleaning house of anyone who might cause problems on multiple fronts, not just labor organization. I stared at the flash drive he'd placed on my table. Why are you giving me this? Because I enabled it, he said simply. I carried out her directives. I fired good people who were just trying to do the right thing. I told myself I was just following orders, protecting the company, being a team player. He looked up, finally meeting my gaze. But I can't sleep anymore. I keep seeing their faces, Tyler, Javier, Madison, you. I didn't immediately reach for the flash drive. You know this could be viewed as corporate espionage, Darren. If Victoria finds out, she already suspects. My access to certain systems was revoked this morning. I'm probably next on the termination list. He pushed the flash drive closer to me. I'm not asking for immunity or forgiveness. I just want the truth to come out. After Darren left, I immediately called Layla and explained what had happened. She advised me not to access the files myself, but to turn the flash drive over to the NLRB investigators. This could significantly expand the scope of their investigation, she noted. If there are financial reporting irregularities, other agencies might get involved. The next morning, I met with Ramon and turned over the flash drive, explaining how I'd received it. He thanked me and promised to handle the information appropriately, noting that whistleblower protections might apply to Darren if his claims about financial improprieties proved true. As I was leaving the NLRB office, my phone rang with a call. From Willowbrook Care Center. Miss Chen, this is Dr. Vance. I wanted to let you know that we received confirmation that your father's financial arrangements will continue unchanged for now. The notification came through a law firm representing MetroTech Solutions. Thank you for letting me know, I said, relief washing over me. How is he doing today? Actually, he's having one of his better days. He asked about you this morning. Wanted to know if you were still fighting the good fight. Those were his exact words. My throat tightened with emotion. My father's moments of clarity were increasingly rare, but somehow, he still remembered what mattered most to both of us. Please tell him I am, I managed to say. Tell him I'm not backing down. Over the next week, the investigation expanded dramatically. News outlets began reporting on widening inquiries into MetroTech's business practices. The company's stock dropped another 12%. 2 board members resigned citing personal reasons. Then, 10 days after I'd turned over Darren's flash drive, I received an unexpected call from Ramon. Miss Chen, I wanted to give you a heads up. The NLRB is planning to issue a formal complaint against MetroTech tomorrow, citing multiple violations of the National Labor Relations Act. We're alleging systematic retaliation against employees for protected concerted activities, unlawful surveillance of employee communications, and coercive practices including the financial arrangement involving your father. That seems fast for such a complex case, I noted. The evidence was overwhelming, particularly after we reviewed the materials provided by Mr. Wright. Additionally, 3 more former executives have come forward with corroborating information. It seems your actions have inspired others to speak up. After we hung up, I felt a strange combination of vindication and apprehension. The investigation was moving forward faster than expected, but MetroTech still had substantial resources and influence. The fight was far from over. That evening, I received another unexpected visitor, Samira from marketing, looking exhausted but determined. I just submitted my resignation, she announced as soon as I let her in. I couldn't stay any longer. Not after everything that's happened. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely concerned. Was it getting difficult for you there? Difficult doesn't begin to describe it. Victoria's been on a rampage, demanding loyalty pledges, making thinly veiled threats. Half the executive team is either preparing to resign or cooperating with investigators. She sank onto my couch. But that's not why I'm here. I came to show you this. She pulled out her phone and opened her email app, then handed it to me. On the screen was an internal communication from Victoria to the executive team, sent just hours earlier. Given recent developments, we must consider all options to contain the situation. Discrediting the primary complainant remains our best strategy. Legal is preparing materials highlighting potential mental health concerns, performance issues, and financial motivations. We need a unified narrative that this is a vindictive action by a troubled former employee, not a legitimate labor complaint. I handed the phone back to Samira, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. They're planning to attack me personally. Yes, and it gets worse. They're preparing to claim that you accessed confidential information illegally, that you coerced other employees into making false statements, even that you manufactured evidence. That's absurd. The NLRB has verified the authenticity of everything. I submitted. Victoria's desperate, Samira said simply. The board is threatening to remove her if this situation isn't resolved quickly. She's fighting for her career now. The next morning, MetroTech issued a press release denying all allegations in the NLRB complaint and announcing they had filed a countersuit against me for corporate espionage, defamation, and breach of confidentiality agreements. The release included carefully worded insinuations about my history of performance issues and concerning behavior following termination. Media outlets began calling for comments. Social media exploded with competing narratives, some painting me as a whistleblower exposing corporate corruption, others suggesting I was a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge. MetroTech's PR team was working overtime to control the story. Layla advised me to remain silent. Let the evidence speak for itself, she counseled. Engaging in a public back and forth will only distract from the actual legal proceedings. But staying silent was difficult, especially when I began receiving messages from former colleagues saying that MetroTech's HR department was conducting confidential interviews, asking leading questions about my behavior and performance. They were building a case against me using my own coworkers. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Maya Chen, a woman's voice asked. Yes, who's calling? My name is Jennifer Blackwell. I believe you know my mother, Victoria. I nearly dropped my phone in shock. I knew Victoria had a daughter, but we'd never met. She'd been mentioned occasionally in company gatherings, a Stanford graduate working for a global health nonprofit in East Africa. Yes, I know your mother, I said cautiously. May I ask why you're calling? Because I've been reading about what's happening with MetroTech, and I think there's something you should know. Something that might help you understand why my mother has been so adamant about preventing unionization at her company. For the next 20 minutes, Jennifer told me a story I would never have expected. Victoria Blackwell, now the picture of corporate success and authority, had grown up in extreme poverty. Her father had been a factory worker who had participated in a failed unionization attempt in the 1970s. After the effort collapsed, he had been blacklisted from employment throughout the region. The family had lost their home, fallen into financial ruin, and eventually split apart under the pressure. My mother was 14 when this happened, Jennifer explained. She spent the rest of her teenage years in unstable housing, sometimes living with relatives, sometimes in shelters. She put herself through college working 3 jobs, hiding her circumstances from classmates and professors. I had no idea. I said, struggling to reconcile this information with the Victoria I knew, poised, confident, seemingly born to privilege. Few people do. She reinvented herself completely. She legally changed her name after college, created a new background story, erased every trace of her origins. But she never forgot what happened to her family. In her mind, unions don't protect workers, they make promises they can't keep. And leave vulnerable people to suffer the consequences. That doesn't justify what she's done at MetroTech, I pointed out. Illegally retaliating against employees, creating secret financial leverage, attempting character assassination. I'm not defending her actions, Jennifer said firmly. What she's doing is wrong, and that's why I'm calling you. I just thought you should know what drives her. This isn't just about quarterly numbers or stock prices for my mother. It's deeply personal. Why are you telling me this? I asked. You're essentially providing insight that could be used against your own mother. There was a long pause before Jennifer answered. Because I believe in the work you're doing. My nonprofit partners with labor organizations around the world to improve working conditions in developing countries. I've seen firsthand how collective bargaining can transform lives when it's done right. After Jennifer hung up, I sat processing this unexpected information. Victoria's opposition to unionization wasn't just corporate strategy, it was rooted in personal trauma, in a childhood destroyed by the aftermath of a failed organizing attempt. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand her fierce determination to prevent history from repeating itself. The next day, the landscape shifted again when 3 major news outlets published detailed exposés on MetroTech's labor practices, citing internal documents and interviews with former employees. The stories confirmed everything I had reported to the NLRB and revealed additional concerning practices I hadn't been aware of. By evening, MetroTech's stock had plummeted another 15%. The board of directors announced an emergency meeting to address recent allegations and leadership concerns. Industry analysts began speculating about potential criminal charges if certain financial reporting irregularities proved true. That night, I received another call from Victoria Blackwell. "Congratulations, Maya," she said, her voice devoid of its usual confidence. "You've won. The board has asked for my resignation, effective immediately. They're announcing it in the morning." I wasn't sure how to respond. This wasn't about defeating Victoria personally, it had always been about stopping illegal labor practices and ensuring justice for wrongfully terminated employees. "I never wanted this to be about you, Victoria. This was about protecting workers' rights." "Don't be naive," she snapped. "This was always personal. You could have reported potential violations without launching a crusade to destroy everything I've built. You fired me without cause. You created secret financial leverage over me through my father's care. You attempted to discredit me when I reported illegal activities. What did you expect me to do?" She was silent for a moment. "I expected you to understand the real world. Unions make grand promises about worker power and protection, but when those promises fail, real people suffer. My family suffered." So Jennifer had been right about her mother's motivations. "I know about your father," I said quietly. "I know what happened to your family after the failed unionization attempt." Another long silence. "How could you possibly know about that? I've never told anyone at MetroTech." "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you've been fighting a ghost from your past, Victoria. Not all organizing efforts fail. Not all unions abandon their members. You can't punish today's workers for what happened to your family decades ago." "Save your lecture," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "The board is announcing a complete leadership overhaul tomorrow. They're bringing in crisis management specialists. There's talk of settlements with all terminated employees and new workplace policies developed with employee input." That sounds like progress. It sounds like capitulation. They're even discussing the possibility of voluntary recognition. If enough employees express interest in union representation. She sighed heavily. 30 years of work, Maya. That's what you've undone in 3 weeks. No, Victoria. You undone it yourself when you chose to break the law rather than engage with your employees' legitimate concerns. After she hung up, I felt a strange emptiness. This was the outcome I had fought for: accountability for illegal practices, justice for terminated employees, the possibility of real change at MetroTech. Yet victory felt more complicated than I had imagined. The next morning, MetroTech's board announced Victoria's resignation along with a comprehensive plan to address recent concerns and rebuild trust. The plan included settlements for all employees terminated under questionable circumstances, an independent review of company policies, and a commitment to fostering open dialogue with employees regarding workplace conditions. The announcement also included a surprising statement: the board acknowledges that mistakes were made in how employee concerns were addressed. We are committed to creating an environment where all MetroTech employees feel valued, protected, and heard. Ramon called shortly after the announcement. "This is a significant victory, Ms. Chen. The NLRB will continue its investigation to ensure compliance with labor laws, but these initial steps from the company are promising." "What about my father's care payments?" I asked, the practical concern rising above everything else. "The injunction remains in place until our investigation concludes. Additionally, MetroTech has indicated they're prepared to establish a proper trust to ensure those payments continue regardless of the ultimate outcome of our proceedings. Their attorneys have reached out to discuss terms." Later that day, I received an email from MetroTech's newly appointed interim CEO, offering reinstatement with back pay and a formal apology for my wrongful termination. The email acknowledged my valuable contributions and expressed hope that I would help lead MetroTech into a new era of employee relations. The offer was tempting. My position had been secure, the work interesting, the compensation excellent. With Victoria gone and new leadership committed to change, MetroTech might become the company I had once believed it to be. But as I considered the offer, I realized something important: my journey had revealed a path I hadn't previously considered. Throughout this ordeal, I had discovered abilities I hadn't fully recognized in myself: resilience in the face of intimidation, determination to stand up for others, skill in gathering and presenting complex evidence. After a week of careful consideration, I declined MetroTech's reinstatement offer. Instead, I proposed an alternative arrangement. I would serve as a consultant during their transition, helping to establish new data transparency systems and employee feedback mechanisms. But my long-term future lay elsewhere. "Are you sure about this?" Layla asked when I told her my decision. "The compensation package they're offering is substantial." "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. "Going back would be easier financially, but it wouldn't be right for me now." 3 months after that fateful Slack message, I found myself sitting in a small office I'd leased in a co-working space downtown. The sign on the door read, Chen Consulting, Workplace Compliance and Employee Advocacy. My phone rang with calls from companies seeking guidance on labor law compliance, from employees facing workplace discrimination, from organizations wanting to improve their policies proactively rather than in response to crises. The MetroTech case had made headlines nationwide, bringing attention to sophisticated forms of union busting that had previously gone undetected. Several other tech companies had quietly implemented policy changes, fearing similar investigations. Industry publications had run features on the new labor landscape in tech, citing the MetroTech case as a turning point. My father remained at Willowbrook, his care secure through a properly established trust as part of the settlement agreement. During my weekly visits, he still had moments of clarity where he would ask about my work, and I could tell him truthfully that I was continuing his legacy, fighting for workplace justice, but in my own way. On a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after my termination, I received an unexpected email from Jennifer Blackwell, Victoria's daughter. I thought you might want to know that my mother has started consulting with a labor relations firm in Chicago. She wrote. Not to fight unionization efforts, as you might expect, but to help companies establish ethical management practices that address employee concerns before they reach the point of formal complaints. She'll never admit it publicly, but your case changed her perspective. Sometimes the most powerful shifts happen in the people we least expect to change. I wasn't sure how to feel about Victoria's new direction. Part of me was skeptical, wondering if this was just another reinvention. But another part hoped that perhaps she had genuinely recognized that her approach had been fundamentally flawed, that preventing unionization through intimidation and retaliation had ultimately cost her everything she'd worked to build. That afternoon, I met with a group of tech workers from Horizon Systems, a MetroTech competitor, who were concerned about similar patterns emerging in their workplace. As they described familiar tactics, sudden terminations of vocal employees, mysterious performance issues appearing in previously stellar reviews, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Here's what you need to understand, I told them, pulling out a notepad to sketch a timeline. What's happening isn't random, and you're not imagining it. These are coordinated efforts to prevent collective action, and they follow predictable patterns once you know what to look for. As I walked them through strategies for documenting potential violations and protecting themselves while exercising their legal rights, I realized how much my own perspective had evolved. 6 months ago, I had been focused solely on my career advancement, believing that hard work and loyalty would be recognized and rewarded. Now I understood that workplace justice required vigilance, solidarity, and sometimes courage in the face of intimidation. The next week brought a significant milestone. The NLRB announced the conclusion of its investigation into MetroTech, resulting in a formal settlement agreement that included substantial remedies for affected employees. The company agreed to reinstate all wrongfully terminated workers with back pay, implement comprehensive policy changes with employee input, and establish an independent monitoring system to ensure compliance with labor laws going forward. Most surprisingly, the new leadership announced they would voluntarily recognize a union if sufficient employees expressed interest, a dramatic reversal of Victoria's staunch opposition. Within days, organizers reported that over 70% of MetroTech employees had signed cards indicating their support for union representation. As news of the settlement spread, my client list grew. Some sought help navigating the complexities of workplace policies, others needed assistance documenting potential violations, and a growing number wanted guidance on how to establish healthy labor management relationships from the beginning, avoiding the adversarial dynamics that had characterized MetroTech. Ramon from the NLRB called to share that the case was being used as a training example for investigators nationwide. The financial control mechanism they established with your father's care was particularly insidious, he noted. We're now specifically looking for similar arrangements in other cases. One rainy Tuesday, I arrived at my office to find Elena, the former HR director from MetroTech, waiting outside my door. I hope you don't mind me dropping by, she said nervously. I've been following your consulting work, and I wanted to talk to you about something. I invited her in, curious about what had brought her here. Elena had been reinstated at MetroTech as part of the settlement, but according to former colleagues, she had remained distant and quiet, focusing on implementing the required policy changes. I've been thinking a lot about my role in what happened at MetroTech, she said once we were seated. I facilitated Victoria's directives. I processed those terminations. I knew what was happening wasn't right, but I told myself I was just doing my job. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. The thing is, Maya, HR professionals are supposed to be advocates for both the company and its employees. We're supposed to ensure compliance with labor laws, not find ways to circumvent them. She took a deep breath. I'm leaving MetroTech. I've been offered a position with the Society for Human Resource Management, developing ethics guidelines and training programs for HR professionals facing similar situations. That sounds like important work, I said, genuinely impressed by her evolution. It is. And I was hoping you might consider collaborating on some of the training materials. Your perspective as someone who exposed these practices would be invaluable. Her request surprised me, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Preventing future violations would require education and awareness at multiple levels, not just among employees, but also among the HR professionals who could serve as internal safeguards against unethical practices. I'd be happy to collaborate, I told her. But I have one condition: we need to include practical guidance for HR professionals who witness violations. Real strategies for ethical action, not just theoretical frameworks. Elena nodded eagerly. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Too many ethics trainings focus on recognizing problems without providing actionable solutions for people caught in difficult situations. As she left my office, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The woman who had once delivered Victoria's termination message was now seeking my help to prevent similar situations. The company that had fired me via Slack was now a case study in labor relations reform. And I had transformed from a data analyst focused on efficiency metrics to an advocate helping others navigate the complex terrain of workplace rights. That evening, I visited my father at Willowbrook. The progression of his condition meant our conversations were increasingly one-sided, but I still valued these moments, sitting beside him in the garden, watching the sunset, sharing updates on my life even when I wasn't sure how much he comprehended. I met with someone interesting today, Dad, I told him, describing my conversation with Elena. She's trying to create better training for HR professionals, so they'll stand up against unethical practices. My father turned to look at me, one of those increasingly rare moments of clarity in his eyes. You're doing good work, Maya, he said distinctly. Important work. His recognition brought tears to my eyes. This man who had dedicated his career to labor economics, who had taught me to value workplace dignity and collective power, could still see and appreciate that I was continuing that legacy in my own way. I learned from the best, I told him, squeezing his hand. 2 weeks later, I received a message from Josh, my former colleague from MetroTech's engineering department. He and several others had been reinstated after the settlement but were now considering leaving to start their own venture. We're developing a platform to help employees document workplace issues securely, he explained when we met for coffee. Something that creates time-stamped, verified records that can't be easily dismissed as fabrications. We're calling it WorkWitness. That sounds promising, I said, immediately seeing the potential value. What stage are you at? Early development. We have a functioning prototype, but we need guidance on the legal aspects. What kind of documentation holds up in investigations? What patterns are most important to track? How to implement this without violating confidentiality agreements? He looked at me hopefully. We were wondering if you'd consider joining as an advisor. Your experience would be invaluable. The offer was intriguing. A tool that helped employees securely document workplace issues could prevent situations like mine from escalating to full-blown legal battles. It could provide protection for vulnerable workers and accountability for employers. I'd be interested, I told him. Let me see your prototype, and we can discuss what would be most helpful from a documentation standpoint. As I walked home from that meeting, I marveled at how adversity had created connections and opportunities one never would have anticipated. The traumatic experience of being fired via Slack had led to a network of relationships with people committed to improving workplace conditions, former colleagues starting ethical ventures, HR professionals developing better training, labor investigators enhancing their methods, employees seeking to understand their rights. The following month, I was invited to speak at a conference on workplace ethics in the tech industry. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room filled with HR directors, company leaders, labor advocates, and employees, I felt a responsibility to translate my personal experience into insights that could create meaningful change. When we talk about labor violations in tech, we often focus on dramatic examples, harassment cases, blatant discrimination, obvious safety issues, I began. But some of the most dangerous violations happen quietly, systematically, hiding behind seemingly normal business operations. They happen in polite emails, in performance reviews that suddenly turn negative, in reorganizations that mysteriously eliminate certain positions. I described the patterns I had observed at MetroTech and had since encountered in other organizations, the subtle retaliation against employees who asked questions, the isolation of potential organizers, the cultivation of fear through strategic terminations. But here's what gives me hope, I continued. These systems only work when they remain hidden. When employees understand their rights, when they recognize patterns of retaliation, when they document their experiences systematically, the power dynamic begins to shift. Sunlight truly is the best disinfectant. I shared practical strategies for both employers who genuinely wanted to build ethical workplaces and employees concerned about potential violations. I emphasized that adversarial relationships weren't inevitable, that many companies were finding competitive advantages in collaborative approaches to employee relations. After my presentation, a young woman approached me, introducing herself as a data analyst at a growing tech firm. "Your story resonates with me so much," she said. "I've been seeing concerning patterns in how certain employees are being treated at my company, but I've been afraid to speak up. Listening to you today made me realize that staying silent only enables these practices to continue." Her words reminded me of where I had been a year ago, recognizing problems but hesitant to address them directly, unsure of my power to affect change. "Document everything," I advised her. "Connect with colleagues who share your concerns. Know your legal rights. And remember that you're not alone, there are resources and support systems available." By the 1-year anniversary of my termination, my consulting practice had expanded to include 3 associates. We worked with companies seeking to establish ethical workplace practices, employees navigating potential violations, and organizations developing tools and resources for better labor relations. I had testified before a congressional committee examining labor practices in the tech industry, published articles on detecting sophisticated union-busting tactics, and collaborated with labor rights organizations to develop educational materials for workers. MetroTech, meanwhile, had undergone a remarkable transformation. Under new leadership and with active employee participation, the company had implemented comprehensive policy reforms, established transparent compensation structures, and created effective channels for addressing workplace concerns. The newly recognized union had negotiated its first contract, securing improved healthcare benefits, clearer promotion pathways, and protections against arbitrary termination. Most surprisingly, the company's performance had improved rather than suffered. With reduced turnover, increased employee engagement, and a restored reputation, MetroTech was attracting top talent and rebuilding client relationships that had been damaged during the scandal. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Darren, my former supervisor who had provided the flash drive that expanded the investigation. "I thought you might want to know that I found a new position," he wrote. "I'm now heading compliance at MetroTech Solutions, helping them build ethical monitoring systems from the ground up. It's challenging work, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm contributing something worthwhile rather than enabling harmful practices. Your courage changed my trajectory, Maya. I won't forget that." His message made me reflect on the ripple effects of standing firm against workplace injustice, how one person's decision to speak up could inspire others to examine their own choices, to find the courage to change direction, to prioritize integrity over convenience. Before diving deeper into my story, could you please take a moment to tell me in the comments where you're watching from? I want to know where my story is reaching. And if you find this valuable, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification, because this story is going places none of us expected. On a clear spring morning, 18 months after that Slack message that had upended my life, I visited my father's care facility with news I was particularly excited to share. The Work Witness platform that Josh and his team had developed, with my guidance on the legal and documentation aspects, had secured major funding and was being implemented at companies across the country. Early data showed it was already helping to reduce retaliatory actions by creating accountability and transparency. My father was having one of his increasingly rare good days. He recognized me immediately when I entered his room, his eyes lighting up with that familiar warmth I treasured. "I have something to show you, Dad," I said, sitting beside him and opening my laptop to display the Work Witness platform. "Remember Josh from my old company? We've been working on this tool to help employees document workplace issues securely." My father studied the screen with interest, his economist's mind still capable of grasping the significance despite his condition. "This creates evidence," he said carefully, finding the words with effort. "Protection." "Exactly," I confirmed, moved by his understanding. "It helps create protection for workers who might otherwise be vulnerable to retaliation." He nodded slowly, then reached out to touch my hand. "Your mother would be proud," he said, referencing the labor organizer, who had been his partner in both life and work until her early death when I was in college. "Fighting injustice, different way, same heart." His words filled me with a deep sense of connection and purpose. My parents had fought for workplace justice through academic research, policy advocacy, and direct organizing. I was continuing that legacy using my own skills, data analysis, systematic documentation, strategic consulting, applied to the modern challenges of the tech industry. 2 years after being fired via Slack, I published a book titled Digital Retaliation: Recognizing and Responding to Modern Workplace Violations. The book combined my personal experience with broader research, practical guidance, and case studies from other industries. It received attention not just within tech circles but from labor advocates, corporate leaders, and policymakers concerned about evolving workplace dynamics in the digital age. During a book signing event, a woman approached my table with a familiar face, Samira from MetroTech's marketing department, who had brought me Victoria's email about discrediting me. "I didn't know if you'd remember me," she said somewhat nervously. "Of course I remember you," I assured her. "Your warning gave me crucial time to prepare for their attempts to discredit me." She smiled with relief. "I've been following your work since then. Actually, I've started something of my own, a marketing ethics consultancy focused on helping companies communicate truthfully about their workplace practices. No more glossy recruitment materials that hide toxic cultures." We exchanged business cards and promised to stay in touch. Another unexpected connection formed through shared experiences of workplace challenges. The most surprising communication came 3 years after my termination, an email from Victoria Blackwell herself. "I never expected to write this message," it began. "For a long time, I viewed you as the person who destroyed everything I had built. But perspective is a powerful thing, and time has given me plenty of it." She explained that after leaving MetroTech, she had gone through a period of deep reflection, eventually recognizing that her fear of unionization, rooted in her family's traumatic experience, had led her to betray her own stated values of innovation and excellence. "The labor relations firm I now work with approaches things differently," she wrote. "We help companies create environments where unionization becomes unnecessary because employee concerns are addressed proactively and effectively. It's the work I should have been doing all along, preventing suffering rather than perpetuating it." She ended with an unexpected request: "I'm developing a case study on MetroTech for training purposes, examining how leadership failures created the conditions for labor violations. Would you be willing to provide your perspective? The study will be more valuable with your insights included." I sat with her request for several days, uncertain how to respond. The Victoria who had fired me, who had created secret financial leverage through my father's care, who had attempted to discredit me personally, that person had caused significant harm. But people could change. Her daughter had suggested as much months ago, and Victoria's current work seemed to reflect genuine evolution. After careful consideration, I agreed to contribute to the case study, with the condition that it include the full scope of violations and their impact on employees. If my participation could help prevent similar situations at other companies, the collaboration would be worthwhile despite our complicated history. 5 years after being fired via Slack, I found myself addressing a conference room filled with HR directors, company leaders, and policymakers. The topic was building ethical workplaces in the digital age, and I had been invited as the keynote speaker. When I was terminated through a digital message 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here today. I couldn't have anticipated how that moment of professional humiliation would lead to meaningful work protecting others from similar experiences. I couldn't have foreseen how exposing workplace violations would create ripples of change throughout an industry. I looked out at the attentive faces, some former adversaries, some unexpected allies, many new connections made through my advocacy work. What I've learned through this journey is that workplace justice isn't just about laws and regulations, though those are certainly important. It's about creating cultures of transparency, accountability, and mutual respect. It's about recognizing that employees who feel secure in exercising their rights aren't threats to business success, they're essential contributors to sustainable growth. I shared examples of companies that had transformed their practices after learning from cases like MetroTech's, emphasizing that proactive change was always less costly than reactive crisis management. I highlighted the success of tools like WorkWitness, which had now helped thousands of employees document and address workplace issues before they escalated to formal complaints. The most powerful lesson for me personally, I concluded, has been discovering that standing firm for workplace justice isn't just about resisting what's wrong, it's about creating space for what's right. When we refuse to accept violations as normal business practice, we open possibilities for more ethical, sustainable, and ultimately more successful approaches to work itself. After my presentation, I checked my phone and found a message from Willowbrook Care Center. My father had experienced a peaceful moment of lucidity that morning, asking about my conference presentation and expressing pride in my work before drifting back into the fog that increasingly characterized his days. The timing of his moment of clarity felt meaningful, a reminder of the values he had instilled in me, the legacy I was continuing in my own way. His condition had progressed significantly over the past 5 years, but these connections remained, transcending the limitations of memory and cognition. As I left the conference center, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had unfolded from that shocking Slack message 5 years ago. Being fired in such a callous manner had been devastating at the time. The sudden loss of income, professional identity, and workplace community had felt like the end of something important. Instead, it had been the beginning of something essential, work that aligned more deeply with my core values, that created protection for vulnerable employees, that contributed to evolving standards for workplace ethics in the digital age. The most powerful form of justice hadn't been what happened to Victoria or MetroTech, though accountability had certainly been necessary. The true justice had been finding purpose in advocating for others, in helping create systems that prevented similar violations, in transforming a personal injustice into collective progress. My name is Maya Chen, and my story isn't about revenge against a company that fired me unfairly. It's about discovering that when we stand firm for workplace justice, even when it's difficult, even when powerful forces push back, we create possibilities not just for ourselves but for everyone who will face similar challenges in the future. The labor board complaint I filed didn't just change one company's practices, it helped change how an entire industry approaches employee rights. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced workplace injustice or witnessed violations of others' rights, please share your experiences in the comments. Your story matters, and sharing it might help someone else recognize they're not alone in their struggles. Subscribe for more real stories about navigating modern workplace challenges and finding purpose through adversity. Remember, sometimes the most devastating professional setbacks can reveal our true calling, if we have the courage to stand firm for what's right, even when powerful forces try to silence us. Your greatest contribution might emerge from your most difficult challenge, just as mine did from that life-changing Slack message 5 years ago. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.